I'm sorry.
Okay, you're good. Hello, good evening, everybody.
Hi.
Good evening for some Gemara before it snows. And everybody will have a chance to review. My teacher, Rabbi Patricia Fenton, used to say review is where all the learning happens. So you're welcome in advance, I guess. We are going to learn something a little different than what we've learned thus far. A little less story, but no less fun interaction between our rabbis here. This week's Parsha, Bo, has a couple of interesting things in it. First of all, I believe that it is in chapter 12, Exodus chapter 12, which is the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people, which is what? Does anybody know off the top of their head?
I think it's the calendar.
The counting of the months,
Yes.
right? Rashi says, asks the question, why does the Torah start with Genesis as opposed to this? And he argues, it starts with Genesis because you got to go into the whole story. There's a whole relationship between the peoples, and it's useful for us, and it's useful for understanding the different nations. Anyway, that's not relevant for us today, just interesting. And we're going to quote from that same chapter today. So I want you to turn your packets to Hullin, Masechet Hullin, which says 210 at the bottom of your sheets. It's Hullin 115. It says 115a, but it's really just like the very end of 115a. Does everybody see it? Mm-hmm. Has a little symbol next to Reish Lakish. Everybody found it?
I'm not.
It's okay. Take your time.
Okay.
It should have this little thing at the bottom of the page where it says Parak, I can't read Roman numerals backwards, 8, and then 115b. Does everybody see it? Close enough? Okay, fantastic. In this conversation, we're going to unpack the question of basar v'chalav, meat and dairy. Where does it come from? How do we know? Things along those lines. Now, it's important to know that the Talmud is not just one thing. We've already seen that in our time together. It's not quite law book. It's not quite storybook. It's not quite legends. It's also halacha. It's pedagogy. It's all these things. And here we're going to sort of tackle this question of where does this thing come from? Where do these rules come from? How do we know this is true? And I think you'll start to get from some of the tone of the rabbis here that it's a bit of play. Like, on one level, we want to know the answer. Where does this come from? How do we know? And on the other side, it's like, well, maybe there's some interesting discussion we could have here, some unraveling of the ideas. Is everybody with me so far? Okay, amazing.
Is this the parak that's called Kol HaBasar? Or?
That's a great question that I don't remember the answer to. I don't have it in front of me. Okay. Well, no spoilers. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. Masechet Hullin often discusses a lot of kashrut law, a lot of the laws of slaughtering animals, things like that. That is a discussion that shows up a lot in this Masechet, and it does again today. Okay, let's start at the beginning of the sugya. Can someone want to start off with what Reish Lakish says? I'm sorry, is there a Reish Lakish up there too? Here. Right where the little symbol is at the beginning of the sugya. Do you see it?
Yes.
Go for it.
Reish Lakish says, from where is it derived that meat cooked in milk is prohibited for consumption?
All right, pause there. So we have a couple of things happening here, right? This is a great classic way the rabbis started discussion, which is, how do we know, where does this thing come from? How do we know? And if you look in the Aramaic, it says Amar Reish Lakish, and then in the fourth word it says Minayin. Does everybody see that? Minayin introduces the question from where is it derived. If you see the word minayin, you know that the question of where is this thing going to be derived from, that's the question. If you look at the next line, which we haven't read yet, it says Talmud lomar. Now this is confusing. This is the Talmud. How can it say the Talmud is saying it's in the middle of saying it? Talmud lomar always introduces a text from the Torah. as confusing as that is. Which is to say that, like, the teaching is saying, the Torah is saying the answer to the question, which is where is it derived? Because it's always going to be derived from a Torah or Tanakh verse. So the Minayin and Talmud Lomar are a unit. They come together. So in part, we sort of, the structure of how Talmud works, those things are almost always in relationship. Okay, Kim, keep going. Got the question. From where is it derived? Then meat cooked in milk is prohibited for consumption.
The verse states, with regard to the Paschal offering, you shall not eat it partially roasted nor boiled in any way.
Okay, amazing. A verse from our parsha. This, of course, is the verse that everyone is expecting, right? Not, don't boil a kid in its mother's milk. Obviously this one. I'm just kidding. It wasn't obvious at all, right? How do we know that meat cooked in milk is prohibited? You shall not eat it partially roasted nor boiled in any way. What the heck is happening here? Keep going.
As there is no need for the verse to state boiled in any way, since it could have simply stated boiled. What is the meaning when the verse states boiled in any way? It is included to tell you that there is another manner of cooking, the product of which is prohibited like this one. And which cooking is this? This is meat cooked in milk.
Amazing. It was obvious, right? No, just kidding. Not obvious at all. So the verse says, uvashel mivushal. Right, so because of the Hebrew, you can sometimes get the doubling thing that happens, right? So that's being translated as boiled in any way. It's like surely it will be boiled or not boiled or whatever, or the negative being fit here correctly, right? And so why do we have this doubling? Right, it says she'ein Talmud lomar, like the Torah doesn't say this, it actually says this. Boiled in any way, the doubling is translated to, or is meant, is understood here as, well, you would normally boil it in water, you're making soup, which you're not allowed to do in this context, right? Which is you're supposed to eat the Paschal lamb, not partially roasted, not boiled. Because it's doubled, it means boiled in water, and also it means boiled in milk, which of course is quite a stretch, as you might imagine. What do people think about this argument?
You already just said it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a stretch. Yeah, Dan.
People have been complaining about the rigidity of milk and meat for a few thousand years.
Yes, this is not a new argument.
Well, my problem is why work so hard when elsewhere in the Torah there's the explicit prohibition.
Yeah, if it's just from where does it derive? This is not where it derives.
Well, maybe it does for Reish Lakish. So one question is like, why this? Right? Why not something else? And we'll see the traditional one later on the next page. We'll see that there is a reason for why this versus something else. But I think part of this is play. Some of it is like we want to get to the root of it. We want to understand, where does this thing come from? We want to feel rooted. They say that the laws of Shabbat are a mountain hanging from a string because they hang on so little, so few verses do they really hang on. This, we actually have quite a bit of kashrut law in the Torah. Birds you can't eat, fish you can't eat, animals you can't eat. Here, we even have the verse. So the question we want to keep in the back of our heads is, why is this the argument being made by Rashi? And we're not going to resolve it yet. We'll see the answer. Any other thoughts?
I guess the classic line is actually very narrow, which is a kid in its mother's milk. So maybe this is a way to sort of expand it to the way I guess it's been practiced for a very long time.
Right, meaning to say that because it says don't eat it partially roasted, don't boil it in any way, we could actually say all sorts of things.
But on the other hand, it constrains it more because this describes only the Paschal lamb.
Right. So here the argument is that just because it is prohibited there, it's prohibited here. But it goes both ways. You could say, well, maybe this just applies to the Paschal lamb. Right, absolutely.
Was it common to boil lamb in a vat of milk?
So I think in lots of cultures, milk and meat are often boiled together, cooked together.
Are they, I mean, I just...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
People put butter on steak. I mean, like, there's lots of
steak
ways.
seems different to me than... I'm serious. Like,
Boiled milk does not seem like a good medium for cooking food.
Well, I think the other possibility is that because it's not just milk, it's the milk of the mother of the...
Right, that's the argument Dan was
specifically
making.
That's right.
saying.
So I think there's the possibility that the combination of cooking the young animal in the milk of its particular mother was associated with some sort of idolatry.
Yeah, I mean, I think your question to speak to that is like, how common was this? I think in most cases, when there is a rule, it means it was common enough, right? I think that there are...
We've seen examples where it's the stories they're coming up with.
For sure.
So that's why I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I know people who eat ham. I know people who eat crab. Like, I know how you cook those things.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know a lot of friends.
Like a
who
lot
eat-
of,
but I
a lot of
think
cream,
that-
a
but
lot of
it
cream
does-
sauces.
Indian food.
But-
Indian foods, lots of Indian food is milk and meat.
Yeah, I don't think we should necessarily think of this as like a steak in a pot with like milk poured over it.
Okay.
I think it's much more expansive of curries and other kinds of cream sauces is a great example, right? Certainly, suffice it to say, it's common enough that we're not allowed to do it, right? That it's like a recognizable thing.
No, I think the fact that all of the texts of the prohibition refer particularly to the milk of the mother, not just milk.
Well, this one doesn't.
No, and this one doesn't.
Right, the other verses
but
do. Yeah.
The
You'll see that it doesn't specify, doesn't focus on that yet. So hold on, let's come back to it. So Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, I love it, just such a beautiful line coming next. Can I get a volunteer to read?
Is that
Go for it.
derivation that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi taught ugly? That you derive a new one.
Okay, so we're missing a bit of the conversation here, but there was another argument by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. He's saying, like, that wasn't good enough for you? That argument was ugly to you? Do you have to come up with a different answer? Right? We don't have that discussion. That we're not going to read that today. But I just love, like, what a chutzpah, right? Like, that's not a nice way of saying it. Anyway.
Did that come in between? or-
No, it comes.
it's in
This
a
is just the
different place?
change of the page. So
Okay,
if you looked at
okay.
the like Vilna Shas, you'd just be
Okay.
on one side versus
Okay,
the other
okay.
side.
It's not like-
No, you're not missing. There's no gaps here. It's just on an earlier part of the page that we didn't read. All right, keep going.
The verse states, with regard to an animal's blood, you shall not eat it, and you shall pour it upon the earth as water. And the next verse adds, you shall not eat it, that it may go well with you and with your children after you. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi teaches that the redundant second verse is not referring to the prohibition of blood. Rather, the verse is speaking of the prohibition of meat cooked in milk, teaching that it's prohibited for consumption. That is, it is prohibited for consumption.
Right. Okay. So I spent a lot of time trying to unpack this one inside because there's very little text here. It's just he quotes the lo tochalenu, right? This verse. It's like it could mean anything. It says don't eat it, but it comes from this line in Deuteronomy, and basically it talks about pouring out blood. And again, the language it's doubled in some way. And so the rabbis, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, in a previous argument, says that doubling refers to milk and meat. It's not obvious from here in this paragraph. And that was a different derivation. So now we have two competing derivations happening here. We don't have to unpack the details of this one too much. Is everybody with me so far? Yes? John, you okay? You hanging in?
I guess.
I know. This is a little more halakhic than we've done so far. So which is to say, we have two potential answers as to the question, how do we know that milk and meat is prohibited? We have one from Reish Lakish that comes from our parsha in Exodus, which is you should not eat partially roasted nor boiled in any way, vashel mivushal. And then we have a second one for Rabbi Yochanan saying, look, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi had a different one. Maybe his wasn't good enough for you, right? It's a bit of a wonky one, I'll admit. All right, turn the page if you're not Ivan already. Okay, keep going, Howard.
Do you say that the verse is speaking of the prohibition of meat cooked in milk? Or perhaps it is only referring to one of the other prohibitions in the Torah? You say, go out and learn from the 13 hermeneutical principles, one of which is a matter that is derived from its context.
All right, pause. So now we have he sets up saying Rabbi Yochanan goes back to Rabbi Yochanan says to Reish Lakish, look, we have this other argument here. We have this other derivation. Are you suggesting, because the rabbis have a rule, which is everybody uses verse once. So if I use a verse one way, I can't then reuse it later. It's got to mean the thing it means, and if you mean something different, then you got to prove what the other one means. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So if I have verse A, and A means something, and you say, well, A doesn't mean that, verse B says that, then you could come back and say, well, what does verse B then teach? That's the tension happening. That's the question here. You're saying that this verse speaks of the prohibition of meat and milk. Perhaps it's referring to something else, like the blood stuff. That's the contextual thing. And here it says, one of my favorite things, Tse ulmad, go out and look, right? Go out and learn, right? And then it says, learn from one of the 13 hermeneutical principles. There are, according to the rabbis, different sort of interpretive rules available to us. If you open your Siddur, the next time you have it, at the beginning, it will have a list of all 13. I think they're attributed to Hillel. I can't remember off the top of my head. Actually, you can see here on the side. Everybody look on the right side where it says notes. It says, from the 13 hermeneutical principles, one of which is the matter is derived from its context, right? And that's one of them. The principle, a matter is derived from its context, dictates from the meaning of an ambiguous verse in the Torah should be derived from the adjacent passage. Seems sort of obvious, right? You read something, it's confusing, you should read what's around it. This principle is included in the 7 hermeneutical principles listed by Hillel the Elder, as well as Rabbi Yishmael's 13 hermeneutical principles. The 13 Rabbi Yishmael's is the one that's in the beginning of the Sim Shalom for sure. I don't remember if it's in Lev Shalem, but certainly in the Sim Shalom Siddur in the morning. It's like one of those first 15 pages. So here, Rabbi Yochanan is saying to Reish Lakish, okay, we've got what are you doing with all this verse? You should just look at the verse in context. Right? What are the other things happening here? Keep reading where it says, to what are the
adjacent verses referring? They're referring to consecrated animals that were redeemed, which are a combination of 2 types. They're non-sacred in that they may be eaten. They're prohibited for shearing and work, like consecrated animals. Here too, one may conclude that the verse is referring to a prohibition that involves 2 types of food. In other words, the prohibition of meat cooked in milk.
Right. So if you look in, I want to say it's the Exodus verse, because that's what he's pushing back against. If you go 2 verses earlier, it has this thing where it says like deer and gazelles and clean and unclean. And in the context, he's saying here, that's the thing we're talking about. These 2 types. There's a disagreement between Rashi and the Tosfot, which category it is, right? Which is to say, here's where it says the here to part. We have this 2 things that's a problem. If the 2 things are a problem there, 2 things are a problem here.
No.
That's the argument he's making here. 2 things there, 2 types of animals, 2 types of foods. And that which includes the prohibition of meat and milk. I know we're a little in the weeds here. You forgive me. All right? Yeah, Dan.
I guess the other stretch here is the prohibition against blood is poured on the ground. Do not eat it. Do not do anything with it. But that's not the way we view milk. So it seems to sort of milk is fine to drink. It's just this mixing. So it seems to.
Right. Even if we go deeper into the context, it seems like it doesn't fit very well. Yeah. I would happen to agree. I don't think this is a particularly obvious derivation, but we can start to see at least how the rabbis are thinking. The super close reading of the verses that they're doing. Okay. Can I get a volunteer to read the next paragraph here? And we'll get a little bit more clarity. Yeah, Iris, please.
Reish Lakish replied to Rabbi Yochanan, my exposition is still necessary, since if the source for the prohibition of eating meat cooked in milk were from that verse cited by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi alone, I would say that the statement applies only to the prohibition of eating meat cooked in milk, but not to that of deriving benefit from it. The verse cited with regard to the Paschal offering teaches us that even deriving benefit is prohibited, just as it is prohibited to derive benefit from a disqualified Paschal offering.
Okay, this is where close reading plays a really big role. Let's go back. Reish Lakish says, you shall not eat it partially roasted or boiled in any way. It's in a broader context of the Paschal offering, which you're not supposed to do anything with. It has a purpose. And therefore, since you're not supposed to do it, the concept we'll see here, or that what he's explaining here is there's a benefit. You're not supposed to benefit from the Paschal lamb. It's got a purpose. Its purpose is to be burned up, right? and then it gets eaten by the family, whatever in that context, right? But for such, which is not, it's not for a purpose. It's
But
not
eaten
for
up
benefit.
only at that point.
In that context, right? It's not to be used in any other way. So he's saying here, okay, even if I accept your argument of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, of this blood verse thing, where it says, lo tochalenu, don't eat, that's only referring to eating. My verse is for benefiting. It's a different prohibition. You can't eat milk and meat, you can't benefit from it. Do people know that those two existed? Wiley?
Really?
What the benefit is. So what would be a benefit? Let's talk about it. What would be the benefit of milk and meat? Okay.
If you sold
Personal
if you had a
enjoyment.
restaurant that you sold food, like it wasn't going to be for.
If I owned a Burger King,
Yeah.
could I sell them and benefit from owning milk and meat?
More than that, you own the Burger King. You're not going to eat any of the cheeseburgers, but you can benefit from preparing the
That's the
selling them.
that's
And
the
other
question.
people eating it.
Right, other people. Can I sell it? And then they can eat it. Right? Maybe I don't even have to cook it. Right? So again, we're starting to peel back. What are the concerns here that the rabbis are explaining? We have this benefit one. So now the Gemara is going to go back. We've got this back and forth happening here. Rabbi Reish Lakish makes an argument, and then Rabbi Yochanan on behalf of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is making an argument. It's going back and forth. So now we're going to go back again. Irish, you want to keep reading? The Gemara asks.
Gemara asks, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, from where does he derive that meat cooked in milk is prohibited for benefit? The Gemara responds, he derives it from here, as it is stated here. For you are a sacred kadosh people unto the Lord your God. You shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. There we go. And it is stated below, neither shall there be a sodomite, a kadesh, of the sons of Israel. The similar expressions teach that just as below, the prohibition of sodomy is a prohibition that involves enjoyment, that is, deriving benefit, not eating. So too here, meat cooked in milk is prohibited with regard to deriving benefit.
Okay. So if we were making a chart, we'd have one verse, we'd have one column that was like eating. And we'd have different rows, and we'd have Rabbi Yehuda Nasi would explain, argument of eating, and we'd have Reish Lakish, and then we'd have another column which is benefiting, and we'd say, okay, well, he gets it from this verse, and he gets it from that verse. So what is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, or at least Rabbi Yochanan on behalf of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi saying? He's using a technical process here called a gezerah shav, which is, it says X in one place, and it says X in another place, therefore this, or it says X and it says Y, those are the same, therefore we can learn one to the other. The rabbis were so careful about this. They did not do it willy-nilly. They made a rule later on that no one else could do gezerah shav. It's like after it ended a certain period, we don't do it now. Of course, we do it now anyway, and we interpret it maybe more colloquially. We don't do it as for halacha in that way, but they were doing that. And so, what's the move here? It says kadosh in one place and kadesh in another. You got the word play. It's prohibited in one place, therefore it's prohibited in another. And the essential nature, at least in their understanding, is that the enjoyment and benefit was a piece of it. We're not going to sort of get into the weeds here about what the prohibitions are. It's not really worth our time. But certainly we have wordplay happening here and a presumption about enjoyment, and therefore those things are in relationship. Even though the rabbis did a lot of gezerah shavs, I actually don't think that they're great arguments. It's like, it sounds similar, so therefore the kadosh and kadesh are really not that close. They don't mean the same thing.
Hebrew sound similar.
I'm sorry?
So many words in Hebrew sound similar because they have the same roots.
Yeah, we had mivashel and mivushal already, right? Or bashel and mivushal. What do we think about this growing dichotomy between benefiting and eating? Is there any more we want to talk about that? Or did we already talk that one full?
It doesn't make that much sense to me, because benefit, you could, if you were, you're not allowed to even prepare meat with milk and sell it to your Arab neighbor. I mean, who would be willing to.
Well, we haven't gotten to that argument yet, but yes.
but, you know, who regularly cooks meat with yogurt.
milk. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not seeing how there could be a benefit, you know,
Yeah.
that they're arguing that you can't have.
Yeah, they're going to the next paragraph is going to talk about selling.
The benefit notion requires a much more complete and fundamental separation from the two things together.
I didn't understand that. What you said again?
Okay, that to simply say you can't eat it, that's, you know, okay, but, you know, it's done, as long as you don't eat it, you're okay. If you extend that beyond not eating it to any other form of benefit that you might derive from it, it requires a much greater distancing of yourself from that activity and thing.
Maybe said a different way, which is like eating is really discrete. It's like really, it's in a box. You eat it, you don't eat it. It's very binary. Where enjoyment actually has a lot more breadth to it.
I mean, it creates a kind of existential taboo, which is much broader and.
Right, you're talking about the implication of the rule.
Well,
Which
it is the character of the rule. The character
Got
of the
it.
rule creates a kind of taboo about this thing, which is much bigger than just don't put it in your
Right, right. If you go to somebody's house and they're eating it, you just don't eat it, it's no big deal. If you say like, I can't even benefit from it, like, oh, it smells really good. If I benefited from it, right? Like there's a real distancing happening. I see what you're saying.
I think it's really interesting this is in the context of the Pesach offering, because I think I'm wondering if this is a larger conversation around how to integrate with your neighbors versus not, because prior to the enslavement, there was clearly an integration problem, question mark? I don't know, it seems to have led to it. And so I wonder if this is partially a conversation around like, how much do we connect with our neighbors and those around us versus how much do we like keep ourselves insular in what we enjoy or benefit from.
Right. I don't think in the specifics of the sugya it talks about that, but I think stepping back and asking these broader questions, I think that's absolutely an
Well, I
element.
was
Yeah,
just
Naomi,
gonna
and then Howard.
say, it may seem like heresy, but you know, the Altifa Shal Gedi B'Chalavimo, it seemed like there was a little bit of, you know, compassion. Like the rationale here, to me, like I don't feel like I understand why this is such a taboo. Like it's not, it doesn't seem grounded, or it seems more stricter than maybe it needs to be. Like it's not like endangering someone's life or stealing or any of the biggies. So it seems like there has to be more of a reason or rationale somewhere to make this such a taboo. Like why?
So I want to pull out the two things I heard you say. One is that boiling a kid in its mother's milk, right, has very clear implications. It's life and death, it's parent, it's child. Like there's real moral pressure there built into the verse itself. And not only that, it's repeated 3 times. And so like that exists. And then here, the second thing you're saying, or what I heard you say, was these other verses don't have the same sort of oomph. Why are we spending all this time if we're not applying it, drawing it from this verse? Right? Did I get that right?
That sounds perfect.
Just to make sure I got it.
Yes, got it.
Well, but I mean,
Yeah. Wait a second. Hold on, Howard. Yeah.
So to kind of take Naomi's ambiguity another step, what if I cook meat in milk and give it away for charity? So maybe I get a benefit because I feel good about it, but now we're really kind of getting too far from
Yeah,
it.
but we can't, it says you can't cook it. I mean, so the prohibition is not really on eating it, you can't cook it. And so you can't, that's what I was trying to say earlier, that you
Well-
can't just cook it and give it away or sell it. You can't cook it.
Right. So right here it says boiled. Specifically, don't cook them together. We have a verse that says eat. We've sort of overlaid them a little bit. He says, no, I'm agreeing with what you're saying. And then there's a benefit factor. So we've got 3 sort of like circles of
Yeah,
of
okay.
things.
This is
Great.
why I don't
Well
follow
put.
Nice then.
Rish Lakish says, oh no, I wasn't just talking about eating, I was talking about you can't get a benefit, but if you go back to his argument, it's actually, the verse says, Al tochlu mushal mevushal. It's like, it's pretty clear it's talking about eating. I don't know how he gets from that to be like, oh, clearly you read that to mean no benefit.
Right, so he rereads it again
rereads it.
to say we can't use the Paschal offering, therefore we can't use the food.
Because you
That's
can't
how he
use
does
it
it.
as a Pesach.
But the
'Cause-
the additional, I'm sorry,
No, there's the Pesach and then there's the eating of the Pesach. Those are two separate.
Right, but he cites a verse that says,
Don't
Don't
eat.
eat.
He's saying if
to
you
say,
if you're
well,
talking
what
about the
that means is
Pesach,
no
then
benefit.
there's
There's a leap of
two
logic there
parts.
that's-
Yes.
But
Yes.
I no longer look for it.
having leapt to the benefit issue, you get then the question of, is it a benefit only from something that you own, or is it a benefit from something that you do not own? So the idea of just smelling it, is that a benefit? It's not yours. Getting a little bit more concrete than just smelling. Suppose you've got a gig as a DoorDash person. Can you deliver? Presumably, you could deliver treif hamburgers.
Can you?
That's a great question. Yeah.
But do you draw the line at cheeseburgers?
Do you even get a choice? But I think that's a great question, right? Where is this line of benefiting, which we are unfortunately not going to resolve here together. But it begs the question.
Does benefiting involve the fact that you're benefiting in some way from owning it, as opposed to it belongs to somebody else?
I've moved a parcel regardless of what it is, kind of thing. Yeah, it's really interesting. Let's read a little bit more. Okay, we're in the fourth paragraph here. School of Rabbi Eliezer. Can I get a volunteer to read? Yeah, Jay.
The school of Rabbi Eliezer taught, the verse states, "You shall not eat of any animal carcass. You may give it to the stranger who is within your gates, that he may eat it," there's your DoorDash, "or you may sell it to a foreigner, for you are a sacred people to the Lord your God. You shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk."
So right here, right, Rabbi Eliezer, the school of Rabbi Eliezer is teaching this verse. Not only that, it's the same verse we just had. You are a sacred people, Deuteronomy 14:21. We're using it in a totally new way, right? Keep going.
The Torah stated the prohibition of meat cooked in milk after the halacha of an animal carcass to teach that when you sell a carcass to a Gentile, you shall not cook it in milk and then sell it. I.e., meat cooked in milk is prohibited for benefit and may not be sold. So you can give it but not sell it? Is that what they're saying?
They are
You can give
selling.
an animal, and then if they end up, right? Then if they end up cooking in a second mother's milk, it's not your problem. Even if the animal.
Which is to say, like, you can, it says, the word is nevela, that's the word for animal carcass, right? It's, my Gemara teacher used to translate it as roadkill,
Yeah, a corpse.
right?
Treif also. I mean, it's.
Well,
not
treif is
necessarily.
torn. The literal meaning of it is torn. It's like an animal, like you're not supposed to eat an animal, it's like its leg, like tore off its leg while it's still alive.
Or a cow that
Right.
dies of some cause, it's not.
Right, they're-
Kosher slaughter.
Right, we use treif as like a catch-all term, but there are other like sort of subcategories. Nevela is one of them, which is basically an animal that dies on its own. It's dead. You can't, if you come up to an animal on the side of the road.
Sorry, when I said treif, I meant not kosher to eat.
Right, of
It's-
course.
It's essentially, right, I'm using it colloquially. So
Right.
the animal is not kosher to eat, but you can give it to someone if they're going to eat it.
Right, so here in this case, it says you don't eat of a nevela, of this animal carcass, but let's say you own it, right? You come back to your field and your cow has died, right? You own it, let's say, in this circumstance. I can sell it, right? And the Torah verse tells me specifically that I can give it away and I can sell it.
To a Gentile or a foreigner.
Right.
What if it's to another Jew?
Ostensibly, no.
But
Ostensibly,
if
no.
you're
If we're
DoorDashing,
reading,
you wouldn't know.
right. We haven't gotten to DoorDash quite yet. Here, right, the school of Rabbi Eliezer is saying it's actually more complicated than that, which is the fact that these things are in relationship, that it's in the same verse as nevela precedes do not boil a kid in its mother's milk, right? It's saying you can't boil a kid in its mother's milk and sell it. those things come in relationship, right? It's not just, you could sell it if you have it, but if you made a big stew and then sold it, or let's say you acquired a stew and you can't sell it. It's not yours. You can't derive a benefit from it. And then the next line says, the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught, and this is the part that we may have been familiar with, and if not, that's okay. The Torah states 3 times, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Cook a kid in its mother's milk. One verse serves to teach the prohibition against eating meat cooked in milk. And one serves to teach the prohibition against deriving benefit from it. And one serves to teach the prohibition against cooking meat and milk. Here's the sort of the answer. Each one does a different thing. They show up, that phrase comes to teach you each one of these categories: cooking, benefiting, and eating. And if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, it's an 81 in Yoreh De'ah. I had a whole semester on Basar V'Chalav. I've forgotten some of it, at least this parts of it. This is what it quotes. This is the very beginning where it says, "What are the rules of meat and dairy?" This is where it starts with. At least this ruling here. Just because I just remembered it. There's a joke I heard on this, so you'll forgive me. I'm going to tell you that joke now. Moshe goes on Mount Sinai and encounters God. God says, "Don't boil a kid in its mother's milk." Moshe says, "Great, don't eat milk and meat together. No problem." God says, "Don't boil a kid in its mother's milk." Great, I gotta wait. Different dishes, meat dishes, dairy dishes. Let's keep them separate. God says, "Don't boil a kid in its mother's milk." And Moses says, "Great, I gotta wait. I can't eat them next. I gotta wait 5 hours, 6 hours." And God says, "Do whatever the hell you want." Some of this, some of it's the rabbis are trying to figure out, what do we do with this? We have this phrase repeated, and it could mean the literalness of boiling a calf in the milk derived from its mother, which on its face feels, maybe we're already accustomed. It feels sort of horrific on some level, just that moral pressure. But it's said 3 times. And the question you asked, which is how common was this? They have to do something with it.
But see, that's what I'm thinking.
Please.
This is really, it really bothered the rabbis, right? It really, I think, is saying something about the society in which people live, that there was something. This is a very dramatic way to, cut yourself off, insulate yourself from the society around you, because they really want you not to have meat and milk. And clearly the peoples you were living among, that must have been very, very common and very, it seems a little, it's just, I think it's saying more about the other cultures than about the Jewish culture in a way.
I still think that the specificity of its mother's milk suggests a practice in the environment which was specific to the milk of the mother of the animal.
Yeah.
And so we given the fact that it was repeated 3 times, we say, well, it can't just be the literal meaning. But I think
that's the rabbis training us from the beginning, right?
Yeah. But I in terms of what in the context of the ancient Israelites would have produced the specificity of that mitzvah.
Off the top of my head, since I don't remember the ancient Near East in that way, clearly it shows up. Yeah, Dan.
I think there's 2 comments. One on this, I don't know how. We've been trained to be horrific about this, but you're a small farmer, you have a cow that gives birth, and there's a calf. That's your nursing cow. So it's not like you have 100 milking cows put into a vat in the factory. So I feel like the practical, you don't have to sort of overinterpret it. The practical is you had your cows giving. If anything, the horror is you're killing the calf when it's still so young it's nursing. Why wouldn't you let it grow bigger? But the fact that that's the milk you have and that's the cow you have isn't that shocking. But the comment I also wanted to make was on the isolation. This is actually sort of the previous thing we just heard is kind of an anti-isolation verse. It's hey, if you find a dead animal in a field, yeah, of course you're going to sell it to neighbors, and it's, you know, it sort of makes it feel like this was just common. Like the neighbors know that like the Jews are going to sell the animals they died in the field probably at a cheaper rate because they're not going to eat it themselves, and it's in some ways it's a connection in a community that everyone knows. Like, hey, let's check. You know, there was a frost. Let's see if there are any animals that died last night that we can buy from them.
Yeah. In the modern era,
Yes.
Ashkenazim almost never eat the back half of a cow. Sephardim often do. It has to do with the effort. It has to do with the amount of effort it is to take out the gidin asher, the sciatic nerve. At a certain point, Ashkenazim was like, it's not worth it, and just sell the back half, which is the same kind of thing. It's like, okay, there's like an opportunity here. We have the resources, we can sell it. We're not going to spend the time on it. Might as well get some benefit from it. While in Sephardic, many Sephardic communities, they're willing to put in the effort, and therefore they have those parts of those cuts of meat.
Kosher. That's fascinating.
Yeah. But I think to your point, which is like there are then cultural relationships being made across boundaries. Where it's like, I can't do this, but it doesn't mean you can't. Right?
To your point about maybe we're a bit inculcated to like, oh, we already think that cooking a calf in its mother's milk is already horrific. We don't think it's horrific to cook chicken in eggs, which seems even worse on like a.
Yeah, we
So, like,
dip the chicken in the eggs to bread it.
Yeah, that's what I'm
right?
saying. Like that, we do that like right now,
Yes.
and it seems pretty horrific when you put it in the context of
Yes.
this.
Yes,
But
it
like
does.
it's been inculcated to be like, oh, the cow is drinking the milk, but the chicken is the chicken.
But the egg isn't a living thing yet, the way a chick would be.
The milk isn't a living thing.
No, but the calf is. The calf is a milk.
I think the analogy does stand. It is it's a funny tension that we've sort of like committed to in so many ways. There's a great section where Rabbi Yossi holds that you can have chicken and dairy together, and the rabbis are basically
I keep waiting for the conservative movement.
Yeah. The rabbis in the Gemara basically say like, yeah, we're not going to bother him, but we're not doing that. Yeah, Jen, you were going to say.
But, I mean,
Wait a second, Jen, please.
I was just going to say, Devorah Kimmelman Block. I am 99% sure. I feel this is a conversation from like a decade ago, but she sells the back half of the cow to a halal butcher.
Yeah.
So it's the same concept. So we are deriving benefit from what we can't.
What we can't have.
use,
It's
but
slightly
also
different.
We don't want to, because it would be antithetical to the idea of having to have that kind of food waste. Also,
For
not get any
sure,
benefit.
right? Everyone can benefit from us not eating this thing in that circumstance. Although it's not treif, as it were, using it colloquially here. Right? It's like it's still fine if we put in the time, and most people don't.
Not textually based, but my reaction to this, it relates to the idea of chasing off the mother bird before you take the chick, as being sort of a similar, at least originally, a similar sense of the relationship between the mother and the child.
Yeah. In fact, that I believe is on 115a. Is in relationship here as well. Right? There is a tension around all of these things: life, death, community, interaction. What can we do? What can't we do? And then how do we know? Right? Are the fundamental questions.
I mean, I can't help but think about, was the intention to create this multi-billion-dollar kashrut industry that
Obviously.
feels
Yes, of
so far removed from any initial intention, the extreme level that we've all taken this to is just crazy, really.
I'm doing. Are people familiar with 929? If I say that, does that mean anything? Okay.
No, you mentioned it.
I did mention it last time. I'm going to mention it again this time. There are 929 chapters of Tanakh. That means the whole Hebrew Bible is 929 chapters. And a number of friends of mine and I are doing it together. It's 5 chapters a week. We're in Vayikra, and I am way behind. Well, I'm not anymore. A little behind. And I spent most of today as I was driving. I had to drive far away, and I was listening to the 8 to 10 chapters that I was behind on. I was moving, I was busy, but I'm more or less caught up now. And I was listening to effectively the first 12 chapters of Leviticus, which is not Exodus, but Leviticus, full of these kinds of details, basically all in one go. And one of the things I was thinking about today, which I'm thinking about now as we're learning this, is when you step back from any individual detail and start to see, like, in the aggregate, as it's like sort of as it's flowing past you, at least this is my experience today, was and I think the rabbis sort of intuit this and are implementing as well, is a real desire for making life, I don't want to say ritualized, but active. Like we walk through the world just,
Purposeful.
yeah, we walk through the world just like staring into the abyss of our phones. And like things, like we're not always doing things, which is like, gotta mow the lawn, you gotta do this, you're running around doing all sorts of things. And I was, the whole thing about the sacrifices and all that I was listening to today, every one of those sets of rules is punctuated with a story, effectively, right? In this case, it was about Aaron's sons bringing fire, and even the story with the leprosy, and all of these things. They're in part these like rules, these systems we set up, but they're also deeply human. And I think here, at least how I'm sort of holding all of that in my head as we're sort of unpacking this, is that we have an outcome we want. It's not entirely clear. It could be cultural isolation in some way, or a sort of wariness towards other cultures who do things different than us. It could be how intentional we are about what food we eat and where it comes from. It could be all sorts of things, and it could be none of those things. Hashem works in mysterious ways. But the tremendous desire to be thoughtful, to be intentional, that this is a choice we're making, as opposed to something we've fallen. It's just happening. And I think that's, for me, the question of like, why spend all this energy with these weird arguments about which verse, is because we want it to make sense. We want it to come from a place where it's like real, that it feels like it's on purpose. Purposeful is a great word, right? It was
That
on
makes
purpose.
total sense to me.
Yeah.
I'm glad we finally got you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Finally got you.
And it's, as it says here, it's related to holiness to some
Yeah.
extent. I mean, I think that how do you live in a holy way, and the intentional,
Deliberately, how to live
yeah,
deliberately.
big deliberate,
Yeah.
doing, sometimes, there are things we do that seem very foolish sometimes, of ritual or of kashrut or of whatever, but it's there, and so we do it.
But I think there's also, if what we have is a divine pronouncement, how could we not put maximum effort into understanding its implications?
I think on some level that's true. I mean, the rabbis are certainly manifesting that, but I don't know that I'm always as intentional as I wanted to be, right? If I really believe, and I do believe that God wants this from me, shouldn't I put a lot more effort into it than maybe I do, right?
But if you believe that, then why do you have to know the why? Why is the why?
You don't have to know the why.
We don't know the why now.
But these guys are spending all of this time trying to explain the why to you. But
So let me push back on that just a little, which is I don't think they're answering the question as to why. They're asking, how do we know? Those are not the same question. Because why would be, here's a classic example of the why, which is why should we do shatnez or prevent ourselves shatnez of having two different fabrics together? It's like, there's no rational reason. Maybe you get a literal rash. That's your rational reason, right? Sorry, pun, couldn't help myself. There's no really good reason. There's no reason given. But we could ask the question, how do I know that this is what God wants from me? Because it says so in the Torah, right? And we could have the argument about whether verse or whatever. And I'm not suggesting that just because it says there was a good reason to do most things, but I don't think those are the same question. How do we know? From where is this derived? It's not the same as, why should I do this?
And there's no obligation to know why. You can follow all the halacha and have no idea why.
right.
There's no obligation to know.
And if you believe it's God's word, then
You don't also,
there's no
I
point
mean, that's a
asking
different
why.
dogmatic question, but not according, you don't necessarily have to care, you don't have to care if it's because of God either. I mean, like, that's a different.
I don't think we're learning, and I'll just double check. We're not. The second chapter of Masechet Chagiga speaks to some of this. It's like a real beginning of mystical questions, and it begins by saying you can't ask what happened, what's above, what's below, and what's behind or before. It's really just reality and forward. And I think for the ancient rabbis, they weren't sure how to ask why, right? And I think as modern people, we struggle with that because I want to know why. Forget it. I mean, forget the rest of you. I want to, right? Like, it's reasonable to want to know why. And I think as modern people, we chafe at the not knowing and not knowing how to find out.
But I'm still confused about this.
Kim, I'll come to you next.
I mean, it feels to me like it is trying to answer the question why. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but you know, the why is all of these different interpretations of these verses that appear to be kind of rim shots, and isn't that really trying to explain why?
I mean, I think we could go and look at every place where this question gets asked. How do we know meat and dairy is prohibited in combination, one combination or another? And we could say, okay, in the aggregate, can we derive why from all of the answers? Yeah, I think we could do that. And it's probably worth doing. It would be interesting to see what that is. But asking the question, right, says, is it boiled in any way? Does that help me understand why I should do this anymore?
I think the why is because it says so. You know, like that.
In
like,
part.
why should you do it?
Yeah.
Because
So the question
Part-
is
is it-
does it say so?
Right. That is the question. Does it
Yeah,
say
yeah,
so? Right?
right.
Kim, I didn't want to lose you there.
I mean, well, first of all, I was struck by what you said about the back half of the cow. I'm still struck by that between them. Because it sounds to me like maybe in the different communities, maybe in one community you had a transaction where you could get rid of the back of the cow, and in the other community maybe it was not as easy. So then
I figure out a way to use
you were
it
like,
yourself.
oh, well, we're not, if they're
Got
not,
it.
we can't sell it to them. So we're gonna find a way through the, and then we're gonna figure out a way where it's actually okay if we don't sell it. So that's one thing that I think is interesting. I don't know if that's factually true, but that's interesting. And I guess that to me makes me feel like a lot of these meanderings, or they're not meanderings, but you know, a lot of the different arguments, they feel like shock absorbers in like you're having a conversation where you're trying to get to a certain place, but you don't actually know who you as like a community will be when you are asking these questions. So there has to be some room for cushion.
Yeah, maybe said a different way, which is, or maybe said, I'm gonna say something. It's in relation to that. You'll tell me if I catch the same sort of premise here, which is, we are lucky in some way that we're 1,800 years, 1,500 years separated from this, that we know how it turned out, but they didn't know how it turned out. Right? And so they're like figuring it out effectively for the first time. Not really, but like effectively for the first time. And so like, it's not obvious to them, right, that this is the way it should turn out. And we experience the Gemara editing it together as the shock absorber. I think it's a great frame. It's like we're sort of bouncing until we get to the place where we want to settle. But like, we know where it's settled already because we've got this 1,500 years of history, but they don't. And I think the Gemara, I think, is doing this on purpose in some way, whether it's shock absorbing or something else, to help us sort of follow the path of where it's going to land us. And even if it doesn't land us somewhere, which it often doesn't, it's taken us somewhere along the way. Does that feel?
But also, they
Yeah.
back then did not know. Look forward 1,800 years. They were like, right now we're gonna have a conversation because my wife said, and that the person who's asking me, like, it is still very present for them.
Yeah.
They're having a real conversation, even.
Right, they don't have a Shulchan Aruch to rely on. They've got each other.
They're like bouncing ideas off to come up with a good answer.
Yeah.
And they actually think the answer matters. I mean, or like it's not just a.
We think the answer matters too. That's why
Right.
we're here, right?
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, Dan.
Well, I think what's weird about, I mean, I don't know what's going to go before and after this, but what's weird about this compared to others, it seems like they all agree that this is a general rule on boiling meat and milk and that you shouldn't derive benefit. So it's almost as if like, this is just what they've always been doing. Like, this is normal. They all agree, don't eat all meat, don't put it in milk, don't derive benefit. And now they're sitting here saying, these are our verses. Why the heck have you been doing this for the last several hundred years? Because I mean, there's definitely other things we've read and other things where it's like, no, we think you should do this and this, but here they all agree. So in some ways, it is closer to the why than the source text, because there's no actual argument over practice.
Or the conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've saved Howard here in his argument. Just in a similar way, last year or the year before, I wrote an essay about the history of dipping the parsley in salt water. My family we established a new custom a number of years ago. We dip parsley in honey alongside the salt water.
Way better.
It's not as gross as it sounds, but do with it what you will. And so I was doing research on where does the salt water comes from, because I wanted to be able to write about the honey thing.
I mean, the
and
rabbis just dip it. It's not specific.
that's true, but the question I was looking up was why the salt water, and on every table it's ubiquitous now. We've discovered a multi-legged friend.
Multi-legged friend, but not a pest.
Okay, wonderful.
What is it?
It's a beetle.
And before I tell you that what I found, why do we dip the parsley in the salt water?
According to our current.
According to our current, what is the common understanding?
Tears.
Tears. It's tears, right? The tears of the Egyptians, right? Spring. Yeah, that is not an ancient tradition. It's like 150 years old, right? But everybody here, we just agreed that was the conclusion, right? It pretty probably started as salad dressing.
Right.
That salt water was the salad dressing. I say this by way of saying that, like, we impart by choice, by desire, by human inclination, all these meanings to a conclusion we've already decided on in so many ways. That's part of how culture works, right? We do the thing and then we sort of understand how it got there first. Na'aseh v'nishma has a deep truth to it in lots of ways. So I think, Dan, your point is well made here, right? It's just like they actually know the answer already. We're just trying to find the best way to get there. And lots of the Gemara is in like that. Not all of it,
Part
but
of
some
the
of
answer
it.
they don't know, I think, does have to do with the Pesach, because they would be trying to square this whole, square the circle of, like, we don't have the temple. So what do we do with this Pesach? And, like, can we derive benefit from it if we don't? Because, like, not everyone ate the Pesach.
But that's not here.
The Pesach was not limited to the temple.
Well, wait a sec. Let's come back to the Pesach and the Pesachim offerings and stuff like that. They definitely discuss that dynamic, but not here. Here is very much about meat and dairy, and it goes on. We only have this.
We don't eat it now, but they did, right? Didn't they eat it?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Okay.
I don't want to say something inaccurate. All of this is to say, as we sort of like step back, as we sort of end our time together here for this week, that the rabbis are interested in, like, peeling back the onion in lots of different ways. We've seen it in different ways and over different weeks, but here, and I'm glad we ended. There's I was going to read one more paragraph, but it doesn't do anything for us now, and sort of ends here. You can go look it up online. But Rabbi Yishmael won. The school of Rabbi Yishmael won in terms of, like, we got these 3 verses. We say 3 things, 3 categories, and that's it. And that's how the argument ends. Like, we know how it ends. They didn't know how it would end, but we know how it ended. And so part of, I think, the beauty of Gemara study and stuff is to, like, try and live in 2 timelines at the same time. We're living where the Gemara lives, so we don't know exactly how it's going to land, because sometimes we don't. And on the other hand, we do. The Shulchan Aruch quotes this section, and it's done. And so we live, I think the beauty of this is, in Judaism, memory is something that is constantly happening. It's not just something that used to happen, we are living it now, right? It's the same thing with the Haggadah, right? It's happening to us now. We are always exodusing every Shabbos, right? Creation is happening every Shabbos, that kind of thing, or at the end of Shabbos, or whatever, you know what I mean? And so I think part of what we can learn from this is that these debates haven't stopped. Not just in the aggregate, but in the specific. We live in this tension. It's like, how do we know? Why are we doing it? Does this really matter? What are the implications? Those questions haven't stopped, and we're certainly not going to stop. Okay, we're going to end there. We will meet back again the first week of February. It might be in 2 weeks, it might be in 3. I can't remember exactly how many weeks are in between.